Good morning. I want to welcome you as well. I'm Reverend Liz, Senior Minister, Monterey Center for Spiritual Living, and I'm grateful to have you here. Was yesterday awesome or what? I think it was the most beautiful day since I've been here. It was a beautiful morning. Steve and I were out helping with the beach cleanup effort, and there were a lot of people out there. It was just beautiful, light breeze. Then we had our rain, which we needed so much, and then it was a spectacular late afternoon, and the clouds, So I hope most of you were outside doing something yesterday, so you got blessed by it. It was fabulous. September's just my favorite month. That's all there is to it. I think I must be in my soul a perennial student, because in September, that's when I always feel that impulsion to grow. We were talking the other weeks when we had the Ark here, when the Jewish Minyan of Monterey was renting the space for their High Holy Days for the Jewish New Year. That so aligns with how I always approach September. And so this month, we've been talking about, our theme has been being awake to growth. So, because that's what I'm thinking about in September. So you always have to come along with wherever I'm going. That's just the way it is. And growth, according to our founder, Ernest Holmes, who was the great synthesizer of the world's religions and philosophies, when he put together this thing he called Science of Mind, he said, I didn't create anything. I just took what was there and put it together. He said that within each of us is that divine urge to grow, that divine urge that will not let us stay in one place. It's always pushing us to be more, to experience more, to express more of our divine self, of our spiritual magnificence. And he also said that to grow and to experience more of life, especially as we look at a different area in our life that we might want to grow, have greater success at work, have greater abundance, have more harmony in our relationships. He said that we have to induce a greater concept. He had such a way with words, Ernest Holmes. We have to induce a greater concept. And that was his way of saying we have to imagine a greater picture than what we have right now, a greater vision for what we want if we are to achieve it. Because in the foundation of our teaching, what we work with in foundations class, is the idea that thoughts are things, thoughts are creative, and what we think, what we dwell upon is what manifests in our life. So when we have this experience, and we're talking about growth, we need to think greater thoughts to experience growth, greater possibilities. And if you're like me, sometimes you feel stuck. Sometimes you just feel stuck. And as human beings, usually when we feel stuck, we start rearranging stuff on the outside, which can be helpful. Kind of move energy, feng shui, that probably can be helpful. But just like everything else about what we teach, when we feel stuck, the place to go is here, not out there. It's not your wife, your partner, what Carrie was singing about. It's what's going on in here. And I found that a lot of people love our teaching. I love our teaching. That's why I'm a minister of it. And they relate. But when we start saying, when we have one of our catchphrases is change your thinking, change your life, that there's an emphasis on change. Change. Not just become aware, and awareness is the first step, and awareness is great. But sometimes we actually have to change our thinking. And that's when we can start getting resistance, because changing our thinking means doing something that a lot of us don't really like to do. And that is when we change our thinking, sometimes that involves admitting we might be wrong about something. Now, I don't know about you, but being wrong was really a dirty word in my house growing up. My family does not surrender their points of view lightly. And it's certainly been an interesting thing to walk out in the world and kind of realize that rising up in me and looking at it. We have to have the willingness to be wrong, and that willingness allows us to pry our fingers off some of the beliefs and opinions we have that we cling so tightly to, those very beliefs and opinions that might be what's keeping us stuck. That might be what's keeping us stuck. So what we're going to look at is two different ways we do this. We have a kind of an unconscious way that we have our beliefs, and many of them are unconscious, and then we have something a little more conscious. So we're going to look at how we can let go and what we need to let go of that can keep us stuck. And so when we let go of them, we can step into freedom and especially fresh new growth. So first of all, I want to talk about something called paradigms. Paradigms, we now in the last 20 years, we've all heard paradigms. It's almost a cliche word because we know in business speak, oh, you got to change the paradigm. But people don't always know, well, what does paradigm really mean? And I got a great definition in a class one time that I love, because in the foundations class, we actually start the first week by talking about paradigms. And this was the great definition I got. A paradigm is a slice of the pie of reality that we mistake for the whole pie. A paradigm is a slice of the pie of reality that we mistake for the whole pie. Keys to paradigms, what? It's like someone who says, well, everybody knows that life is this way, or everybody knows that something is that way. Well, everybody doesn't know it. So if you have coming out of your mouth something like, well, everybody knows that such and such is true, that's when you want to grab and say, oh, do I have a paradigm here? Here's some examples of paradigms. It was believed before Christopher Columbus that the world was flat. That was the belief, right? That was the paradigm. So you couldn't go, if you went in a certain direction on a boat, you were going to fall off the edge of the world and die. Now that makes us laugh today, but that was really believed. And what did that serve to do? It served to limit where explorers would go because of their belief. Now we can say, well, that doesn't happen today, but yes, it does. Before probably the 60s, where was the best place to get a watch? Where did you want, if you were going to get an expensive, the best watch, what kind of watch would it be? Swiss. Well, one day, a gentleman came up to one of the great Swiss watchmaking families with a new idea he had for a watch, completely revolutionary way to do watches. And so the Swiss watchmaker looked at that and said, but this doesn't have any moving parts. This watch has no moving parts. This is not a watch. It doesn't have moving parts. Who would buy that? That's not a watch. Get out of here. So he went back to his native Japan, created a digital watch, and the rest is history. In fact, most inventions Do not come from the status quo, from the conventional group of people doing things a certain way, scientists, whatever. The great discoveries are always made by these renegades because by their very nature, they operate out of the paradigm. Whatever the paradigm is, and that's the challenge for them because often they aren't seen. I was just reading in a magazine about a woman. What's her name? Did I write her name down? Her name's, it's an interesting name, so I can't remember it. But she is a female conductor, and she's the conductor of the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. And when she was a little girl, she saw Leonard Bernstein, and she said something just happened in her heart. She said she was already playing the violin. Her parents were musicians, so she'd been playing the violin since she was a little girl. But she knew when she saw Leonard Bernstein that she wanted to be a conductor. So when she went to her next violin lesson, she told her teacher. And he just looked at her and said, no, girls don't do that. And for years, she could not be seen in the world because people don't get that women could be conductors. And now it seems crazy. And those of us who are not in the classical music world, it doesn't make any sense. But for people operating in a paradigm, what's outside that can't be seen or experienced. And so for us, when we operate in paradigms of things like, you work and you get through your years, then you retire, then you can have fun. In fact, I know a young person who absolutely hates her job. But she knows in 11 years her husband will be able to retire and get his benefits, so she's going to stick it out for 11 more years. Maybe some of you have been in a place like this. Or you believe that you're getting to a certain age, so you can't have the kind of fun you had when you were younger. We all have paradigms about life, and what they do is they literally draw a box around what we can experience, around what we think is possible. And whatever limits what we think is possible for ourselves becomes the limit to what is possible. Not because it's truly impossible, but because we think it is. Because we think it is. The only limit to what we can experience in life is the limit that's right here. Socrates said, this is good because this is one of those, who said that? Now we know, or if this person was right. It was Socrates who said, the unexamined life is not worth living. Well, to me, the unexamined paradigms are what make our life not worth living. Because any time we're unwilling to look at what we believe and question it, then we're stuck operating at the effect of it. We are stuck operating at the limit of that belief. And of course, we don't normally examine them because we think that that's what's true. What's true is I'm this kind of person, and so this is the kind of life I have to live. I have to struggle. I didn't have a college education, therefore. Or I'm too loud and boisterous, therefore. Or I'm too old, and therefore. Or I'm shy, and therefore. Or somebody told us, you could never do that. That's not right for you. But something in us said yes, but we let that be a limit. So what I invite you to do is check in and be willing to be wrong about what you believe about yourself. Be willing to be wrong about what life is if what you are believing life is anything other than an ever-expanding, ever more joyous adventure. There's a truth test that you can take. And I love this truth test. Here's how you can tell if something is good to be believed in or not. You have a thought, and now Reverend Liz has given you the thought that thought might be a paradigm, and a paradigm that is limiting you. So you ask yourself, if this is true, how does that make me feel? If it is true that because I am too big, too boisterous, nobody's going to love me. Could be a paradigm. If that's true, how does that make me feel? If that makes me feel more expanded, then it's true. If it makes me feel more contracted, it isn't. Because what did the great teacher Jesus tell us about the truth? What does the truth do? Sets us free. So your truth test is anything you've been believing that doesn't make you feel more free. If it makes you feel more limited, it is not the truth. And I would support you in being willing to surrender those ideas, those paradigms that are not the truth, that are not the truth of you. And if you want assistance in identifying those, if you want more of a way to really work with those, then I invite you to consider doing a couple of things. See a practitioner. Practitioners, we are skilled to listen to you, listen to your stories, and help see what paradigms you're holding that don't serve you. That is what we're trained to do, to point them out, help you see what could be the truth that sets you free underneath that, do prayer with you and support you and empower you to go and create that new knowing for yourself. The foundations class, that Tuesday night class that this week will be week 2, that is another great way to explore and become more aware of any paradigms or beliefs that are limiting you and holding you back. Then you can lay them down and move into what's new. So that's an unconscious way that we keep ourselves stuck. There's a more conscious way that is something we do in day-to-day life that also doesn't support our growth. And that is how tightly we hold on to our opinions. So now I'm not talking even about beliefs about the way the world is. I'm talking about our opinions. I'm talking about my personal rule book about what's right, how I should be, and often, frequently, how you should be. That I have my opinions. And it's okay to have ideas about it and preferences. It's certainly okay to have preferences. But when we start clinging on to those opinions, we get stuck and we get very separate from other people. That makes us separate from other people because if you don't have the same opinion I do, you don't have my same rule book, which guess what? Nobody really has the same rule book I do or you do. Then I have made us separate. So, woohoo, 2 for the price of 1. I'm stuck and separate. Yes! So this is something to really look at because it's so insidious. And depending on how you were brought up, again, this is where my family, definitely, I have to be right about my opinion or it's like dying a little death. But really, what happens is if I can hold my opinion lightly, and then when you come in with one that's different, if I can just look at it instead of going, no, I'm not going to look at it. That gives me so much freedom and an opportunity to grow. Because here's the thing about opinions. Great story. Great story. I'm not sure if it comes from the Hindu tradition or the Buddhist tradition. But one day, there was a group of people working in the fields, and kind of like this sanctuary is, there was a group working on one side of the fields, and there was a group working on the other side of the fields. Well, all of a sudden, this god appeared, and this god was wearing a hat. This side was blue, and this side was red. So the god strode majestically through the fields and disappeared, and everybody said, "Whoa! What was that? That was God. Did you see that? That was so cool." "Yeah, and he was wearing a red hat." "What? No, he wasn't. He was wearing a blue hat," said the people on the other side of the field. "Are you nuts?" And they started saying, "No, God has a blue hat. No, God has a red hat. No, God has a blue hat." And they probably skirmishes broke out, and they started beating each other up because they had a different idea of God. And by God, that was wrong, because I saw that blue hat, or I saw that red hat. Well, about an hour later, after everybody was exhausted from the fighting and kind of limping back to the fields, the god turned around and came back. And lo and behold, the people saw. They saw, those that had been on the red side now saw the blue side, and those that saw the blue side now saw the red side. And they kind of got embarrassed. And then some of the wiser ones started laughing, because they got it. You know, it is only what we see in any one moment, especially out there in the world. And when we hang on to these opinions so tightly about what's right or the only way to be, then we start beating the rest of the world up. And it is going to be very difficult. In fact, it is going to be impossible for us ever to create a world of peace when we're out there fighting with our strongly held opinions. It's not going to happen. The only place peace can first happen is here. It has to happen here first. And one of the best ways I know is when I allow myself to hear and see other opinions. And there is that risk. Because if I really let in other opinions, then I may find out I was wrong. But in being willing to be wrong and laying it down, I can find out something that expands me. And just another Benny, I can start getting closer to you and start understanding you. Because I haven't let that difference of opinion make you an idiot. It's only in my head. There's a great practice that I invite you all to do, or those of you who recognize that opinion tight holding on thing might be you. You don't have to raise your hand. But here's a great practice. Is if you have a colleague or friend that you really have a disagreement about, and there's so much up today that one could have a disagreement about, what we may or may not be going to do in Syria. You name it. There's so many things. There's so many things. Is take their point of view that you've been vociferously, I've always wanted to say that word on stage, thank you very much, vociferously arguing against, whether with them or just in your mind. Take that point of view and challenge yourself to write down 3 ways that opinion, that point of view, has some validity to it. what that involves is you opening your mind. It doesn't even necessarily mean you have to stop having that opinion. But it does open your mind to something bigger and something greater. Because here's the thing, why do we get so stuck in our opinions? Not really because they're the coolest thing in the world, but because we have started misidentifying ourselves with our opinions. We think who we are is our opinions. And we think who we are is our paradigms. And so we've got to grab onto them because that's who I am. I'm a person who believes this. I'm a person who believes that. I'm a person who doesn't stand for this. We do that. And while that may define our personality, that is not the truth of who we are. We are so much more than a collection of opinions and beliefs. But until we're willing to go beyond those opinions and beliefs, that is the sum total of who we are. Who we really are is this ageless, birthless, deathless, infinite. I mean, when we've all passed from this mortal plane and look back on life, we're going to go, I can't believe I got in that 2-hour argument with my dad about that. Why didn't I just spend all that time loving him? Hello? That's, what we know from a greater place. And until we're willing to surrender some of those opinions and beliefs, we can't transcend. But each of us do have the power in us to do that very thing. We just have that little step of being willing to be wrong. And then we can start opening up to see what's really true. And what's really true is that the divine is in each and every one of us, in each and every person, in each and every idea. Even if to our minds that idea is kind of whacked or goes nowhere. That the divine is in every person and every idea. And our job in life is not to argue for our points of view, unless, we're in a debate club, and then that's the point. But our idea in life is to pierce to the place where we can see the divine in everything, where we can see God in everything, and where we can live life knowing that it is that ever unfolding adventure. That it is that ever-growing, ever-unfolding adventure. That is the truth of who we are. And that is our ultimate freedom as human beings. To be able to lay down an old thought, an old idea, and open up to the new idea that wants to emerge, the new, bigger idea that wants to emerge. And when we do that, that new, bigger idea that wants to emerge is really the greater truth of who we are. It's the greater truth of who we are. So let's pray. So moving within to that center within me, that center that is within everyone, that is the infinite, that is the divine, that is God. It was said so beautifully by Meister Eckhart, God whose center is everywhere, whose circumference is nowhere. that infinite power and presence is my life now. And so as I recognize that infinite power and presence is my life, not my history, not my thoughts about myself, not my thoughts about the world, but that infinite, that field of all possibilities is the truth of my life. I allow myself to open to a larger idea of who I am. I allow myself to open to a larger idea of health, well-being, and vibrancy. To open to a larger idea of loving relationships. To a larger idea of abundance and financial freedom. To a larger idea of purpose and a meaningful life. In this moment, I am free to lay down any idea that does not serve me, no matter how much I may have defended it in the past. If it is not the truth, if it is not serving my greater growth and expansion, I lay it down now. And as I do that, I know it no longer has power over me. I lay down any limiting thought about who I could be and what I can experience to open myself up to that greater joy and love and peace and freedom and abundance that the divine is so desiring to express through me and around me. I claim my good life. And in doing that, I claim good life for each and every person on this planet. I open myself to a larger way of seeing that embraces everything and everyone and allows me to move freely to the greater and greater expression of the divine that I am. I am so grateful for the knowing of this truth. I am so grateful to know that with this claiming, my life expands immediately. And so I release this word into that law, into that divine aspect of God that says yes to my thought and brings back into my experience that which I have spoken. So I release this word now. I rest in truth and say, and so it is.
And so it is.